Great, let's go ahead and get started today. Thank you everyone for joining. We are got a very exciting topic today, managing permissions and access to Concord. So happy to be walking through this. I think we can just go ahead and jump right in. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Zach Kinsey, the head of sales here at Concord. I am pretty much in charge of all things sales and customer relation here at the moment. So yeah, happy to be walking you through the system today. And it's an important topic because I get a lot of questions about, hey, how do we make sure that we're only sharing documents, certain documents with certain people? How do we make sure that people are getting notifications? That's also kind of tied to a lot of the permissions. So we'll be talking through all those things in the system today and kind of just best practices for setting all of this up. So without further ado, I guess we can just jump right in. If you do have any questions, as always, feel free to put them into the chat or the Q&A, and I'll make sure to update those and keep track of them. And also, if you have any topics that you'd like covered in a future webinar, put those in. We're always looking for ideas. We've been doing these webinars for many months now, and so we're kind of like, okay, what do we do next? So if you have any ideas, just let us know, and we're happy to cover that for sure. Great, let's go ahead and jump here into the system. I'm going to turn off my camera so you don't need to focus on me. You can just focus right on the screen. So inside of Concord, and I'm going to show this inside of Horizon, which is our new platform. For those of you that don't know, it's the newer version of Concord. However, the actual settings and permissions are going to be the same in both Classic and Horizon. So no big differences there, but just to know that's why it may look a little bit different than what you're seeing. So I'm going to come in here to my settings. This is where all of the permissions really start. And we're just going to talk through how everything is managed inside of Concord. Now, in order to see a lot of this, you do have to actually be an administrator in the system in order to be able to access like your users and your teams and some of these different things we're going to be going through. So if you don't see these options in your account, just know that's the reason why. So you'll need to probably work with an administrator if you want to make any changes to this, to the actual like users and folder access and things like that. So here we've got our settings inside of Concord, and I'm going to click into my users here. So the first way to set up all of your permissions in the system, first we need to have users in the tool, right? So we're going to add users into Concord. You can do this through like single sign-on or Active Directory if you're using either one of those systems to help kind of, set up users inside the tool. But if you're doing this manually, you come in here, you put in their email address, you'll add them in, and then you have three options when you very first start. You can make them a viewer, which is a read-only user. Those read-only users are going to be free and unlimited. You can have as many in the system as you want. You can also set them up as a collaborator or a creator. So these are kind of just your standard user roles. The big difference between collaborator and creator, creators can sign documents and collaborators cannot. You can also assign them to a team here. So as you're inviting them in, you can simply just put them into the team that you want to add them to. And the teams are super important because that's how we really kind of set up all the different permissions around who gets to see what in the tool. So you can do that here. So you'll first put them in, your users get added into the system. You then have your team here, which is where you can start organizing kind of who has access to what. So you'll set up your teams here in the tool. And maybe you want to do that by department, executive, finance, HR, IT. You could also split these up differently. Like I have some companies who do this based on location. They have a lot of different locations. They have a team by location. Just lots of different ways to do it, but whatever's going to work best for your business and your needs, you can set up the team here. You then also have your roles. So the roles are where you decide, we talked about this earlier. We've got the viewer, the collaborator, the creator. We also have a creator team manager. This allows you to do all the standard things as well as manage users themselves. So if you wanted to allow someone to add or remove users and move them between teams, but not have full access to everything, you can make them a team manager. And then administrator does have access to everything. So they could see every document. They can update anything in the system. They pretty much just could do everything. And then on top of that, we also have these custom roles. So maybe you've got a specific team or role that is not going to fall underneath one of these, and you want to create something really custom. So you can actually come in here. I've got this compliance officer role, and you could actually choose specifically what that user can or cannot do in the system. So let's just go through a few of these. Can they configure the company approvals? Can they, delete tags? Can they sign documents, delete folders, create folders? I mean, there's just tons of different things in here. So you could actually go through and create a custom role if you want to get really specific about what a user can or cannot do, all here in the system. And then you can assign people to that role. You can assign users there as they come into the tool. The way that we give permission to documents, and this is a really important part of Concord, is through folders. So the folder permission, I get a lot of questions about like, number one, can we separate everything so certain people only have access to certain documents? The answer is yes. You do that through folder permissions. And then number two, how do we determine who gets to see, who gets which notifications as far as like when deadlines are expiring, things like that. That's going to all be done based on the folder access. So this is where you're going to build out your folder structure in the system. You've got both main and subfolders here, and you can create as many folders as you would like. And then you'll add your different teams into those folders. So when I come in here, I can like, choose who I want to give access to this. I can select it and click share, and then I can choose who has access. This one is currently set to all. Maybe I don't want it to be all. Maybe I want it to be just the executive and the finance team. And so I'll go ahead and set it up that way. One thing to keep in mind with information technology, like with any of these folders, any of the subfolders are going to be inherited by who has access to the main folder. So if you have the main folder, you automatically will have access to the subfolders for that specific folder. So just keep that in mind. And so if you want someone, a user, to be able to access the documents and see them in the system, you just give them access to the folder that the documents are in, and that way they will have access to those documents. And then if you don't want them to see documents in a certain folder, like let's say HR here, maybe this one should only be certain people, you would simply just come in, you create the folder, you choose who you want to share that with, and you'd only share that with certain people here in the system. Okay? And you can do either teams, so like if you want to set up permissions based on teams or groups, you can. And then you can also do individual users as well. So that can all be set up there. One thing to mention about setting things up in folder permissions and teams, what makes this really useful is let's say you have somebody leave the company and they're on a specific team. Maybe it's someone on the finance team. When they leave the company, you're going to remove their user from Concord. You'll deactivate them, you'll remove them. And then when their replacement comes, you'll simply just put their replacement back into the same team, in that finance team, and then that person immediately gets access to all the right documents in the system, notifications, all that type of stuff. So setting them up in those groups or those teams is really useful, not only for giving access, initially, but also when you have to replace people in the company, then it's really easy to just swap them in and out and, get them what they need. So that's how we set up our users, teams, roles, and folders. We also have tags in the system. Tags a long time ago used to be a pretty big deal in Concord. This is actually how we did access in the very beginning, was based on tags instead of folders. That changed quite some time ago. And so tags now are really just for tagging documents. So you can create whatever tags you want. You can add them to your documents. And, if you needed to identify things based on different factors, tags can be useful for that, but not something that we really use anymore for access or permissions. So that's all here. We also have our bulk upload. That's something typically only admins can do. So that's there as well. In the system, you also will have all of your like personal details. So this is where you can set up your specific kind of permissions and things that you care about. Like your image can go here, your date format, language, number formats. These are actually kind of new, the date and number. Um, you've got a few other options. This is something for the classic version, that display shortcut menu. So some things here. Not a whole lot to go into. You can go check that out if you wanted to. We have our notification center. And like I said before, the way that we identify who is going to receive a notification for a document is based on who has access to the document. That's how it currently works. So if a user has access to the document, they will receive the notification for that as long as they have the notifications turned on. So I do get a lot of calls around, hey, I've got these executives. They feel like they're getting too many emails, even though it's only one email a week on Monday. But they feel like they're getting too many emails. They don't want to see that email anymore. So the easiest thing to do is just have them turn that off here in the system, so they don't have to receive them if they don't want to. But within these permissions here, you can, choose a lot of different notification settings. Who do you want to see the approval step completed? Do you want to get those in an individual email or a daily digest? And this is one other thing to mention if you're not aware of it. The system, if you're someone who's actively using Concord, you have a lot of contracts in there that you're working through, like you can get a lot of emails every single day from the tool. If you don't want to get an email for every single thing, you can set up a daily digest. So that allows you to receive one email per day. It's going to list all the changes that happened for that day, instead of receiving those individual emails. So I personally, I like the individual emails because I like to know as soon as something happens so I can go take action on it, whether someone's signing, approving, whatever it might be. But if you wanted to just get one email per day, you could. So that's all there. I think I saw we have some questions here. How did you get to account? I'm not sure what that means. Maybe that means like the settings. The way to get the settings in Concord is you go down here to the bottom left, the little gear icon. That's both in Classic and Horizon, and then you just click on settings. That's how you're gonna get there. And then you'll see that information. And like I mentioned, if you don't have access to see all of this, it's probably because you're not an administrator. Some of these things only admins can see. Um, Another question here, do all documents require a tag? I seem to have that turned on, but maybe there's a way to override that rule. Um, so there is a setting in the company preferences, which I was going to go through in just a second, but there is a setting here where you can turn on the need to require a tag, and I'm actually going to turn mine off because it's been bugging me on demos lately. But yes, if you wanted to, you could actually force tagging, so you can turn on this mandatory tagging, and so anybody that creates a document, it'll just force them to tag that document basically. So it's a setting. You can force people to do that if you want to, or you don't have to force them, either way. And we'll go through all that in just a second here, but there's another question. If we want to make digests for executive staff so they could receive info about all contracts and OF that were signed this week, how can we arrange this? So in order for them to receive specific notifications currently, and this we are working on improvements to our notification center, but currently they would need to go in and do this themselves. So like there's no way to do this from an admin level. Each user will have to come in here and actually change their notifications. So the way that they would do this is they'll come in here and instead of individual email, they just change everything to daily digest. And then that way they'll just receive one daily digest of everything. So currently that would be the way to set that up with them. Yeah. Okay. Let's go ahead and jump into, there's a question, is there a practice module to help us with learning the system? I mean, we do have a sandbox, but it'll probably be easier just to have you use your account. It really depends on your company setup and what type of user you are and those types of things. So you could reach out to myself and I'm happy to help you figure out what works best for you. Yeah, it just really depends on the situation. Cool. Let's jump into preferences here because there are some pretty cool things that I think a lot of people don't know about in the company preferences. So I'm just going to go through these really quickly as we have some time. The first thing is our Concord support feature. This allows us to temporarily access your account if you want help with troubleshooting. We do this a lot during the implementation phase, like when we're helping set things up for the first time. It just gives us temporary access to your account. So that's the Concord support feature, and you can turn that on and turn that off anytime you would like. We also have our kind of company-wide settings here. So this is something only admins can control, but I'm going to quickly run through these in the system. First of all, we have password rotation. So a lot of companies have an internal password policy that says, hey, you need to rotate or change your password at least every 6 months. And so if you turn this on, that requires the end user to change or update their password every 6 months. So something there for security. You can turn that on if you'd like. Next, we have administrator access. This one is probably the one that I get a lot of questions on and the one that confuses a lot of people, but it's also a really important feature. So if you're an admin and you want to see every single document in the system, whether you've been added to the document or not, you're going to want to turn on administrator access. So what this allows you to do in Concord, of course, any document, you can share it with certain people, you can put it in certain folders. But if you're an admin and you need to see everything, the easiest way to do that is just by turning on administrator access. And that'll just let you see every single document that's coming into the system, no matter what. You can, find them, you can join them, all those types of things. So that's administrator access there. This one allows you to include a download link in the confirmation emails when signing is complete. So when someone gets the fully signed document email that says, hey, the document's now been fully signed, this allows them to just simply download that so they can have a PDF copy of the document. So this is one I recommend turning on. It just makes it easy for them to get their copy. You also have download link and invitation email. So when you're sharing out the invitation email to invite someone to come in and review and sign, this allows them to simply download the document into Word or PDF directly from the actual email that you share with them. So that's here. This is for the signature. This is double authentication for your users. So you're going to force all your users to use a double authentication to sign. And then this is for the guests. So if you want to use double authentication for both your users and guest users or external users, you would just activate these. You've also got document tagging. So this reminds them to turn on or to use a tag, which I showed you earlier. So you can force tagging on all your documents. We have a feature here because we have these collaborator users. This one allows them to sign. It's a little bit silly because like you could just make them a creator if you wanted them to do that, but if you wanted to limit some of the other things that collaborators limit, but you still want them to be able to sign, you can turn that on. This requests automatic signatures upon final approval, and I would definitely recommend turning this one on. So as soon as that document is fully approved, if you're using an approval workflow, it'll automatically send out the request for signature, which is kind of nice. So just just continues through that process there. This allows you to turn on or off the AI features. We have a lot of AI features in Concord, the Copilot, the data extraction, etc. If this is on, they're enabled. If this is off, then those features do get turned off. So that's here. And then we have require security code for external guests to verify email after a certain amount of time. So you can do like, 10 minutes, 1 day, 2 weeks. So this is if you want extra permission on access to your document. You can make it to where people, would need to verify who they are within that time frame. We then down below have custom branding. So this is where you can set up like your logo being sent on the documents that are on the emails that go from the system. You can also have it come from your email server. You can take off some of the Concord branding. So that's custom branding. This is a an enterprise only feature. So if you're on an enterprise plan, you'll have access to do that. And then we have our IP whitelist to help with deliverability and different things here. And that's pretty much it. There's another question here regarding notifications. Are the viewers getting any and all notifications from Concord or just any renewal expiration notifications? Yeah, good question. The viewers just receive notifications for like deadline alerts. So if a contract's expiring, ending, renewing, any of the deadlines you set up as, those types of deadlines, that's what they're going to be receiving is that weekly email. They don't get the notifications for like contract is signed, contract approved, things like that, because that's all pre-signature. But any of the post-signature deadlines is what they'll be receiving in that weekly email. Another question here, is it possible to have two or more approval processes for the same document? For example, a procurement approval first, then there would be a legal review, and then another approval process for a final contract before signature. That is a great question. So the way that you could set that up is through when you're doing your approval workflow, you'll just set that up here with different teams. So you could have team step one could be like a finance approval, and then step two could be like legal team. So once you're done with the finance approval, then that gets routed to the legal team or to whoever for that next step. And then once that step's done, it could go to legal for the final review, and then they can approve it. So we do have like the step-by-step approval routing. That's how it would be handled in our system, just to do like first step, second step, third step, whatever you want to set up there. Yeah. Great. Let me know if these are all really great questions. We've got an active chat this morning, so let me know if anything else pops up there. I think we've covered most of the stuff here. We do have our advanced notification center, and this is actually one that we should talk about real quick. So this is the ability to manage organization-wide notification preferences for deadline digests. So I'm sorry, this goes back to a question from earlier from Natalia. I completely did not even think about this option. So this will actually cover some of that. We do have the ability to set up a custom digest and choose who actually receives that. So you can come in here and be like, hey, there's certain people that should receive this. And you can choose like how frequently they see that on a daily, weekly, monthly, or annual basis. So we actually do have the ability to set up like a custom one. The thing with this specific feature is we released it. We were gonna do other things to it, and we didn't quite get to that because we're completely like redoing all the notifications. So it does work right now, but it's pretty limited. You can basically just set up like, hey, this is who gets the digest, and you can change the frequency. That's pretty much all you can do right now. So happy to talk through that more in detail if someone has questions on it, or you can go in and just try to test it out. You'll kind of be able to see what you can do with it in your system, but that is something you can do here. So that's under the advanced notifications. Yeah. Great. So that's there. We probably won't have time today to talk through all the other things because they're not really, permissions or things around that. But hopefully that gives you a lot of guidance on as far as document access, who gets notifications, who can do what in the system, edit, sign, all those different things. And one other thing to talk about, I'm just going to go back to the user roles here real quick, just to show you one other thing here. So when it comes to the custom roles themselves, I would really, especially if you're an administrator, well, I guess you're the only ones that can see this, but I would just recommend going in and like taking a look at all these things. There's a lot of different options here. And so this is where you can really start to customize who gets to do what. And it becomes pretty powerful when you start setting up custom roles and really identifying who gets to do what in the system. So definitely just recommend going through all those. We won't have time to go through everything today on this webinar, but definitely do that when you have some time. So when you think about it, the one thing to mention too with the documents, when a user comes into Concord, they're only going to see the folders here that they have access to see in the system. So they're not going to see if I don't have access to an HR folder, I don't see this folder at all. So that's one thing to keep in mind too. Like, don't worry about someone even being able to see the folder and knowing that it exists. If you haven't given them permission to it, they don't see that. They don't see the documents, they don't see the folder. When they do a search, when they ask AI something, like they won't have access to any of those things in the system if you haven't given them permission to that. So. Couple other questions here. Do the custom digests replace the user selected toggle for receive weekly deadline reminders by email? So the idea behind them is you could turn off, the initial idea behind them is you could turn off your notifications here. Like you could turn this off so you don't get that weekly email. It's really for like executives or people that don't need to get bugged a lot. You could just have them turn this off and they would need to do that. And then you could still get them the notifications through the digest on a different cadence. Like maybe they only want that once a month or whatever. It's just kind of more for the executives. So it does, you would turn off the other one and then this would be the replacement for it, is the idea behind it. Yeah. Can you explain how to create a workflow or automation? Yeah, so we do have these system-wide workflows in the tool. Um, I feel like they're very underutilized. Not many people use these actually currently, and I think it's just because there's more building we can do here. But the idea behind a workflow, this is not an approval workflow, it's an automation workflow, is the ability to basically have a trigger move documents, add people to documents, things like that. So you can basically come in here and say, hey, let's say that if the agreement category equals corporate governance, then we're going to take an action, which is we're going to move that automatically to the compliance folder. We're then also going to invite these people to the document and make them, this type of user access. And then we could also do different things. Like you can automatically add certain properties. You can extract the property. You can invite them to review it and you can move it to a folder. So you can say like, hey, anytime we get a contract that is corporate governance, there's all these different things we want to do with it just by default. So that way we don't have to do anything. And honestly, the new AI extraction, we did just like add that where you can extract the property there. So that's really cool because it'll just automatically pull it out, and that way you can do it like by doc type and different things. So yeah, so the whole idea behind a system-wide workflow is just creating those triggers to do different things, move them to different places, add people to them, etc. So that's the idea behind it. Another question, can we put documents in multiple folders? You cannot. So it is very much like a folder on your desktop. You can only put that document in one folder. You could tag the document with different pieces of metadata, with different properties or with different tags, but you cannot put it into different folders. Yeah. Great. Hopefully that you guys a lot of great questions today. Thank you for all the questions. Anything else, let me know. I think we're just about out of time here, and unfortunately, I do have a call right after this, but let me know if you have any other questions. As always, feel free to reach out to myself. I'm going to put up my email address here just so you can have that if you do want to send me a direct email, and it's just right there. Feel free to reach out for sure. Yeah, no, thank you all for the great questions. I think we covered a lot of ground this morning.